Jason's first lesson.
So over this lesson, what we're going to do is I'm going to have everyone stand up, and we're going to do something called a chit chat. Which is what
this was an idea that I got from Kathleen Schultz that really allowed students that were normally silent during class to feel comfortable discussing in small groups because they get to choose their own groups, they get to talk to their friends, and I thought it was a really good idea of an activity to start off a class because, I mean, it's true, like I said, with all the garbage in the hallway and everything, students come into classes with their minds not on the class that they're about to walk into, so I'm sure that some students are coming in thinking about the girl that fell from the sky that they just, read for homework last night. But a lot of the other students are thinking about, what their friends were talking about in the hall, what their girlfriend, boyfriend's doing, like, what they just saw, or, lunch they just came from or something. So this is a great idea for students to kind of mill around, a word that I use way too much in this opening video. And talk to their friends about prompts that I give them, which, as you can hear from the video, I asked them to talk about the ending, because it's fresh in their mind. They just finished the book for homework last night, and they get to do it in a casual, comfortable way, so that, and they get to choose who they talk to, and then groups can mix together, which is what eventually happens in my video, is it starts out pretty individual, and then two big clusters form there, start talking about completely different things, which makes group discussion later so awesome, because they each have different inputs to tell the whole class.
Talk about the ending.
One thing I didn't like that I did, though, was I kind of gave a little bit of my opinions about the book before I let the people discuss, and that's why I also tried to preface things like, well, it doesn't matter what I think, it matters what you think, so students wouldn't get intimidated and think that they only could talk about the idea that I just gave them. But I think with, younger students that perhaps they need to come up with their ideas first before they hear mine, so that I don't sway their opinions.
What did you guys think about how she
the other thing I was trying to do here is this was after the group discussion had already kind of petered out about talking about the ending, so I was posing each group new things to think about, new questions, asking them about character arcs or plot structure, themes in the book, getting them talking about a little bit more before we came together to make the final discussion with the entire class even richer, because they have more things to discuss. So this is the part where the class all came back together to discuss what they had talked about in groups. I pointed out to them that I found that it was interesting that they started talking to just a couple individuals, and then they kind of made two huge pockets in the class that, like I said, discussed completely different things. So I wanted the first group to share what they were talking about, because it was so much different than the other group, and I wanted the other group to hear the ideas that this first group was discussing. I asked them the first question, did they like the ending, just so that they had a place to jump off of.
It wasn't really wrapped up.
Okay. Who did you talk about?
One thing I liked about what I did here, too, is that I actually responded to kids' questions, like what I'm doing now. I didn't just go, okay, cool, yeah, okay, all right, sounds good, which was something that I didn't like that I did in my hook. I actually elaborated on them. I tried to make connections between students, try to compare groups to each other, and they were picking up on that and doing it themselves. So students were kind of almost calling on each other, saying like what Erin just said there, how she was like, well, I really like what Royal said da-da-da-da-da-da, and then Royal took that as his cue to kind of explain more what he had been talking about. Right now what I'm doing is I'm using this discussion as a teaching point, and I'm teaching them what an episodic novel is, what it means, like how that affects plot structure. And so now I'm posing a new question to the class, asking if this wasn't written in small episodes by different characters, how would that have changed the story? And that sparks a whole new discussion that also has a lot to do with the ending. When it switches right here, I'm discussing, this is after that discussion about episodic novels, this is now talking about location, and I'm making a teaching point talking about literary devices, asking them, like, what does it mean that this novel about lost childhood just ended in an amusement park? And Erin thinks it means irony. Christine talks about how she really thinks that it adds symmetry to the novel and makes it come full circle, because they didn't have a childhood as kids, but then they come back and they're in an amusement park about to run away, which is a very kind of childlike action. And she brings it back to Royal again, the points that he was making earlier, and I noticed that I pick up on that, and that's the reason I posed this question to begin with, is because I figured they'd make this connection. So I'm trying to end our discussion right now by kind of finishing it all up about the end, and I'm talking about how when the characters come together, like Royal was talking about, and they have whole like new story, new hopes, new dreams kind of like dialogue, that it was interesting it happened in an amusement park, because it makes, even if the novel doesn't feel like it has a definitive ending, it gives the audience some kind of closure, gives them a little bit of a literary arc. So I try to make those teaching points there and work them into the discussion, which, I feel like makes the teaching a lot more natural, and I really think the students picked up on it really well. At this point, we've moved on to our activity out of the opening activity, and what I'm doing here is going around to each group, asking them to discuss as a group, and then write in their writer's journal about prompts I'm giving them, and I'm giving every group a different prompt to kind of incorporate writing into the discussion. We did the first chit-chat to get them up and moving and talking and being comfortable with the whole group, and we started discussion that way. For the activity, I wanted to incorporate writing into it. What I didn't like about the way I went about this is I really should have had these questions on some kind of overhead or on an Elmo or something, because I think we're wasting a little bit of class time, because I'm going group by group, giving them their prompts, and I mean, it's a well-behaved graduate student class right now, but if this was really, 9th grade or 10th grade or something like that, there might be a little antsing around that goes on at the other tables while they're waiting to figure out what we do, and so I think that if they were all up on the overhead to begin with, it would have given me a better opportunity to kind of explain the assignment, explain what they're doing with their writer's notebook, and get to it all at the same time, so we're not wasting any time, and so that I can start observing conversation right away as they get into it, make sure everyone's on the right track, make sure everyone's focused, and that they're understanding the assignment and getting the most out of it, because what they're supposed to be doing first is talking to their group members. I gave them the opportunity, decision rather, to work individually if they wanted to, but I really think in this kind of setting where they had just walked around and talked and done the chit-chat, that they should feel comfortable with the people that they're sitting with and working with, and hopefully they can start a great discussion with them first about the prompts I'm giving them, which is different than the prompts from the beginning about the ending. This is more about themes of the book. One group has death, one group has Nella and her whole situation in the story. One group has the way the story is told episodically, and one group brings it, to the whole forefront of middle school or high school, and we talk about how Rachel's bullied in the story. And I wanted to bring this back to real world, because a lot of kids were talking about how they couldn't relate to Rachel. They thought she was just a brat, and I wanted them to kind of understand her a little bit better and think like, well, maybe she's such a brat because she gets bullied all the time and people make fun of her about her race. Do you think there's situations like that in our high school? What could you do to remove it, like to solve those kind of situations? Could you include these kind of people? Do you know any people that are like this? Discuss that and discuss how it compares to Rachel, and find examples in the book that kind of support your statement. I wanted to do this because I really feel like when one group's talking about episodic and writing structure and stuff, that's an interesting thing to write about and discuss with the class. Then the two groups are talking about death and, suicide and homicide and all that kind of stuff. That's another, great thing to get the class talking about kind of more controversial issues. And then this brings the class into discussing the book against, their own real lives. And I thought that that'd be like a really great way to end a discussion. At this point, I'm walking around to the groups and just kind of asking them some more questions. Like, at this point, they've really gotten to discussing the original prompts I gave them really thoroughly. And so now I was listening to what they had to say, checking back into them, checking their understanding before they start writing and making sure that they know what they're talking about. And even posing some more interesting questions to them, more things to consider to really enhance their writing, give them more things to think about. In this situation, I'm talking about, what if the whole story was told from Brick's point of view rather than from a mix of people? Because they were talking about what if it was only told from Rachel's point of view. With this next group, I asked them, because I was asking them to consider death in this novel, I also am right here asking them to consider limbo, how Roger sits by Rachel's bed watching her potentially dying in the hospital for so long. How does that affect his character, and how does it inevitably affect Brick's character when Brick meets Roger? And I wanted them to not only think about death, but the theme of death, not just it physically and how it is in the story very, very seriously, but also the idea of it and how it kind of just, is in the story at all times. Even though we didn't actually get to my closure, I did want to explain what it would be to everyone, because I really thought it was an interesting idea. So far, they've had their chit-chat and discussed. We've discussed as a whole class, lots of different themes about the book. They've talked in groups and written about it in the writer's notebook. We've discussed what they've written in the writer's notebook. And now for homework, what I want them to do is take Nella's section of the book, which are always the smallest chapters because they're journal entries, and create a found poem out of them that they feel either captures the ideas that we talked about in class, talks about Nella's character and kind of maybe defends why she did something or sheds light on why she did what she did up on the roof, or what they felt like was really poignant to themselves and really spoke to them, something that was powerful to them that maybe they took away from the novel and really enjoyed and really meant something to them. I thought that'd be a good homework assignment to kind of wrap up the entire day's discussion.
Discussed about plastic.